Hello, I'm Doug Smith, and today is the 15 February 2013 edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of Portsmouth Town Hall. My special guests today are John King, our Emergency Management Agency Director, and John Klimm, our Town Administrator. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The topic today is going to be our town's response to the blizzard we just got through, which was named Winter Storm Nemo. And it's kind of ironic. It seems like just less than 6 months after Hurricane Sandy, we had a major winter blizzard last weekend, which dropped 16 inches. That was the official total, I think more in my backyard, blocking the roads and causing power outages to most of the town. Now, even though the circumstances were different for this storm than for Sandy, how well do you think the town handled the storm, if I could ask John Klimm?
Well, Doug, first of all, as all of us know, it was a major storm. And I have to start by commenting on our police and fire department and public works department and other town operations who I think did a terrific job under the circumstances. I would be remiss if I didn't mention John King, and I want to say something nice about him, and I do that even if he wasn't sitting right next to me. We're blessed in Portsmouth to have a gentleman who is absolutely qualified, knows this business, and you know, when we get into a serious situation, you want to make sure the person that's there advising all, you want to make sure that they know what they're doing and that they're qualified. And I cannot say enough about John King. I mean, he was there night and day from the very beginning, and his decision making or recommendations are sound. And I suspect that many Portsmouth residents are not aware of the true talent that we have here, and I just wanted to make those comments, as well as our cadre of volunteers. We would not be able to do what we do without people, you know, unselfishly giving, you know, sitting in an emergency center overnight to be there to assist John and others. So overall, I think that we fared well. I think that every time we go through one of these storms, we need to see it as a learning process so that we can continuously improve. But having been here now just about a year and having our second storm, I was very pleased at the progress that we made from the first storm, and I'm very pleased at all of our town employees and our volunteers that did a great job.
Thank you, John. You know, I agree with certainly your assessment of John. He's a great leader, I think, and he's been very extremely useful in this process moving forward. For residents, it was kind of interesting because functioning in a major winter storm is a lot different from functioning during a hurricane. I think the most obvious one is when power is out, most of us don't have heat.
Right.
Now, you can live without power, but it's very difficult to live without heat. Fireplaces don't really do the trick. John, let me turn to you because I know the emergency management system has to work even when there's no power. And what are some of the major challenges that you experienced during this winter storm?
We responded in the way we would respond to many other events. Emergency management takes an all hazards approach, Doug, to responding to a situation. Obviously, a winter storm is different than a summer storm. But the response agencies, the police, the fire, and the Department of Public Works are your first responders. And of course, most visible in this storm might have been the Department of Public Works. And coordinating the actions of all the responders through the Emergency Management Agency is pretty much the same task in any incident. Citizens, you touched on a point there earlier that I'd like to really hit on. Citizens need to be prepared to shelter in place for 72 hours. And that includes winter and summer. So we put out some recommendations on Thursday, and one of those is that you should be able to heat at least one room in your house, independently of the commercial grid, power grid. Preparedness is important for the citizens. You need to take some personal responsibility in making sure your household can be self-sufficient for 72 hours because frankly there are some emergencies where first responders won't be there for 72 hours, and history shows us down in New Jersey that it can be much longer than that as a result of Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah, I think I was just wondering how do you keep the emergency operations center functioning when you lose power in town? Like I think basically most of the whole town lost power for a while.
The entire Aquidneck Island was out of power for 16 hours, I believe, was the minimum amount of time, and some people went for in excess of 48 hours, including some here in Portsmouth. We have a backup emergency generator at the Portsmouth EOC. Behind that is 450 amp hours of battery backup, and behind that are portable generators. So we're well equipped for emergency power. We just chug right along as if nothing happened when the power drops.
Okay, so the EOC was able to had electricity.
Absolutely.
It was able to stay up.
Absolutely.
Did this affect your capability to be on the internet or to communicate?
Again, we have redundant systems for internet connectivity and communications. We have our connection to the state EOC is, I think, 7 layers deep. I'd have to count them, but about 7 layers deep of redundancy.
How did you get information, for example, from National Grid during this storm?
We are very fortunate in Portsmouth that the East Bay regional representative from National Grid is resident with us in our EOC. National Grid has 5 regional representatives fanned out across the state, and they actually go into their service areas. And to the best of my knowledge, we are the only town that actually has the resident in their EOC.
Yeah, that makes it a lot more convenient to try to find out what's going on.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. What was the process when DPW, I know DPW, I got to keep mentioning those guys because they were fantastic during this thing. They were out there all day, all night, plowing roads, but also reporting down power lines and all the other stuff that people have to do. And I was out there briefly at 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and I drove into the EOC and I almost got lost. How do you get lost on straight roads? It was just very difficult to even navigate. But when DPW would be calling in, I hear the radio calls coming in, reporting things. How do you, what do people do, or how should they contact you if they need to tell somebody that there's a down power line that they can see, or something?
For a down power line, use your normal channels. Call the police non-emergency number 683-0300, or the Portsmouth Fire Department's non-emergency number 683-1200. And the reason that it goes through those agencies is because somebody has to go out and inspect the line to see what we actually have. Is it a cable line, a power line, a telephone line? And then we take the appropriate response from there. And all those requests for reports of wires down funnel into the EOC, and then we notify National Grid, and we determine the priority. Is it an immediate life safety issue? Is it blocking access to public vehicles?
Now, how do you establish a priority in that sense? What are the key concerns? Obviously, potential for loss of life or health or something. But how do you establish those kind of criteria for?
National Grid has 2 separate reporting lines. One is immediate life safety, power line down, trapped in a vehicle, for instance. The other reporting line is for everything else, basically, and there's 2 different priorities within that: immediate and less than immediate.
Yeah. It was very handy having the National Grid guy in the EOC, because you could at least get a sense of what he's looking at when he's talking to all the folks he had out on the ground. And
even though he's resident in the EOC, the down wires still get reported out through their normal 800s. It's the lines that we call police and fire lines.
Yeah. One of the things that came up again during this storm, and it probably will during every storm, is that we don't have a shelter in Portsmouth anymore. Why is that, John?
The Red Cross let me back up a little bit. The Red Cross organizes and runs the disaster shelters. There's more to running a shelter than meets the eye, and Red Cross is supremely confident in shelter management and operation. Red Cross simply does not have the resources to open 39 shelters in 39 cities and towns in Rhode Island. So they have regionalized their shelter operations. Our regional shelter for Aquidneck Island is the Gaudet Middle School in Middletown. We still do have a Red Cross certified shelter at the Portsmouth Middle School. If there were an emergency that impacted only Portsmouth and didn't require Middletown, Newport, then we would open that Portsmouth Middle School shelter as a Red Cross. Red Cross would come in and run it like they did in the old days. But we do have a shelter, but Red Cross does not have the ability to run 39 shelters simultaneously.
Well, let me tell you from my experience, the Red Cross doesn't necessarily run the shelters. It's the Red Cross volunteers that run the shelters.
The Red Cross
and
is,
if we had enough volunteers in Portsmouth,
Well, see, that's the point. First of all, I know, because I've spoken to many of our town councilors, that they're very concerned that we don't routinely have our own shelter. But it does get down to the issue of volunteers. And in this whole operation, I know a little later we'll probably be talking about this more, but we can't run this operation without volunteers. There are really two issues relating to shelters that are problematic. One is that we don't have our own. The second is the whole animal, your pets issue. There are some folks that will not leave their home if they can't bring their pet to the shelter. And so I think while we're not in a situation of emergency preparing for a storm, we need to address both of those issues much more globally to figure out whether there are options for us.
see what the Red Cross did in the past, at least when I was involved in working the shelters here, was they would provide the training. They have courses, you can get qualified, and then they help pull people together locally. Do you think we could try to generate some volunteers for the Red Cross in that capacity? And would that help?
It would certainly help, but in the event that a shelter were open on Aquidneck Highland, they'd be working in Middletown. That's
Well, the capacity of the one in Middletown is something like 525 people.
that's correct.
At one point during this storm, we were kind of concerned about if power had stayed out for any length of time, we might go over that capacity, in which case somebody else would have to open something up.
Portsmouth Middle School is their secondary shelter. When
And they have volunteers to man that?
Yes.
Okay, are they Portsmouth volunteers, do we know? Or?
I believe we still have probably a dozen Red Cross certified volunteers in Portsmouth.
Okay. Seems to me a dozen is more than we ever had in the past, so that might be sufficient. How do people know when that Gaudet Middle School shelter, or I know there's another one in Tiverton, which may be just as close, just about, for people in Portsmouth?
Tiverton Middle School is the shelter in Tiverton. It probably is closer for some of our residents.
Yeah. How do we know when those are open? How do people know, rather?
211 is a good resource that many people don't know about. 211 on the telephone will get your sheltering information. 211 is run by the United Way. We also put out that word through Portsmouth EMA. We put that word out on broadcast, print media, and the internet.
Okay, is that like a robo phone thing where you dial in and there's a message on there? Is that how it works?
We did in this instance put out a code red alert.
Well, no, I know about the code red. In fact, I want to talk about that in a second, but I'm just wondering on the 211, what do you get when you call it? A person?
A live body.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm impressed. That's great. I know one of the things that you were looking at early on was the possibility of a warming center, perhaps at the Portsmouth Middle School. And I know you ran into problems with that, but I assume the same kind of information on a warming center would be available to people on 211 or through the police numbers,
Yes.
et cetera.
Yes.
What's the difference between a warming center and a shelter?
A shelter is a place where you have a cot, a blanket, and food for all your residents. There's an intake process so that Red Cross can track the residents in a shelter to know who's where, and for repatriation purposes after a disaster. There are many services in a shelter that are simply not in a warming center. A warming center is a building with heat that we can keep people from freezing. It's bare bones, there are no facilities, it's just a warm place to go.
If somebody had lost their power, which everybody did for a while, and their power was still out, could they stay in there ostensibly as long as it took for the power to come back? Or
In a warming center
Yeah,
or a Red Cross
in a
shelter?
warming center? I mean, presumably you have restrooms and things like that, but I mean, just a place to stay in out of the cold to exist.
We could shelter people in a warming center as long as necessary, but eventually we'd have to move them somewhere else.
Yeah,
where
I'm
there are
sure you
better
need food and
facilities.
other things like that, yeah. I know that once the power goes, Cox cable goes, the TV goes, everything goes, you're down to the radio. What is the primary radio station that you would like people to listen to during a storm in Portsmouth?
Our two local radio stations that we disseminate information through are WSAR in Fall River and WADK in Newport. WADK 1540, WSAR 1480.
Okay.
WSAR, out of those two stations, is the only station that has an emergency generator. They stay up when the power is down. And we have very good relations with both the stations. We have direct lines into their control rooms and cell numbers of their management.
I know a lot of people, me for example, in fact, even in the EOC, we were listening to WPRO. One of the reasons was we could stream it online through their internet feed, just to hear, you know, somebody talking about what was going on in the rest of the state. What about WPRO? Is there any way we can make notifications through them?
Not directly. The Providence market stations accept their information from the State Emergency Management Agency.
Okay, so we can't communicate directly with them then. The other interesting thing, and John alluded to it a little bit before, was this internet public information team that you had in there. It seemed to work a little bit better this time after Sandy. People sort of got the ideas that, hey, they are putting information out. How do you think this helped during this storm compared to Sandy?
I think the capability has matured somewhat, and I know that the popularity has increased dramatically. We picked up about 200 new Facebook users during this storm, and we were actually able to go interactive during this storm with a two-way dialogue with our internet people. So our capability has matured significantly.
Do you find that more people are using the internet for information during these kinds of storms compared to the regular media, for example, like TV and other things?
I honestly don't know. I don't know what people's primary method is,
Yeah.
but the more outlets we have, the better we are for public information.
You know, and it's funny because on the face of it, you'd think using Facebook or some kind of social media for emergency stuff doesn't make sense, but in many ways it does because it offers a way of two-way communications.
It gave us a unique
So you can put information
capability.
out and people can respond back to you, and then you can respond back to that, which is kind of interesting.
As you know, Doug, we were getting some very valuable information during the storm from our citizens that were transmitting information back to us in terms of what actually was going on in the field or whatever. So,
Yeah.
When we think about these various avenues, we think about disseminating information out. But this is the first time that I've seen that we've really utilized the capacity to get information in so that we know better what's going on out there. It was the other thing is as you know, I was really surprised at the number of the quantity of the responses that we were getting and how quick we were receiving that information. It was really very informative to see how much information we were transmitting and receiving.
Yeah, I
during the
think it
storm.
really gave us a way to get a handle on when the power was coming back, because we sent a thing out saying, is your power coming back, and identify your street. We got something like 70 responses within 20 minutes, which is, pretty good. And I think it gave a much better handle on where the power was still out and where the power was coming on in Portsmouth. I think that was kind of valuable stuff. Did all this information help you out in the EOC?
Absolutely. One of the primary functions of the EOC is to provide a common operating picture to our government leaders, to our first responders in the field, and to the State Emergency Operations Center. And the ability to be connected to our citizens via the internet was enormously helpful in situational awareness.
I know that you've got a survey up again that's asking for comments on the response, similar to what we did during Sandy. Where can people find that survey? Can we get that off the EMA website, for example?
The survey, a link to the survey is posted on the EMA website, and I believe after today it will be posted on the town website as well. And I think you'll probably have a link posted here on the Portsmouth This Week.
Yes, we will. I think it's
sometime.
up right now on the screen.
Excellent.
And I would encourage everybody to favorite that Portsmouth EMA website, because I think John does a fantastic job of putting out blog information that's just the stuff you need, not a bunch of fill. And it's every one of those blog entries has been exceptionally useful, I think, for people out there. But the other thing, it is also gives links to our Facebook page and to our Twitter feed, all of which can be used to both communicate back and forth. And I think as people get used to this, it'll get even better if they know about that. Getting back to the issue of volunteers, I know even in the EOC it was looking kind of lonely in there. For much of the time, I realized it was very difficult traveling. I know at least one of our volunteers, Rich Talipsky, was in there for almost like you. He was almost like almost as many hours as John King. What can you say about volunteers? Because I think you probably need volunteers not just for the shelter stuff, but for the EOC itself, or their EMA. What kind of people would you like to see come forth? And
people that want to serve their neighbors. That's the primary requirement for becoming a volunteer with Portsmouth EMA. You want to serve other people.
Are there any particular skills that you're looking for?
We need people in almost all disciplines. We need people that have internet skills. We need people that are just able to load boxes into cars. We need doctors, nurses, physicians to staff medical points of distribution. We need everyone. We need any volunteer that wants to serve their neighbor. Go to the EMA website, look at the volunteer page, click the volunteer link on the menu, and sign up early and often.
Okay, that's good advice. And for those of you that would like to help, I know it's very frustrating when you're sitting at home and you feel like you can't do anything, but actually you could be doing something because you could be helping out the entire community. For John Klimm, I know, John, you spent most of Saturday in the EOC. How would you rate our response and the EMA's response? You mentioned earlier that you were very pleased with it. You thought it was progress. How would you rate the response to this?
I think, as I said, every storm I'm seeing significant progress, and that can only be a good thing. But I also see that we have unmet needs. As you know, the center in many ways is very tired, very old. It needs updated equipment and that type of thing. So we're going to be addressing that over the next 6 months or so. We want to be able to give these folks the tools necessary so that they can do a good job. So I think that a continuation and an expansion of our social media strategy and also trying to get the word out that we really need volunteers. You know, we're a community of 17,000 citizens, and we have a lot of retirees. We have a lot of folks that serve this country with just distinction in the military and whatever, and we would ask folks to contemplate the possibility of volunteering time with John at the center in terms of this operation. As you know, one person can make a huge difference, and so if any of our citizens out there are looking for, have contemplated the possibility of giving back to their community or participating in some way, maybe they might be newer to the community and they don't know a lot of folks, this would be a terrific way to do something really meaningful for our community. So we hope that if there is an interest, that people go ahead and contact John so that we can get them signed up.
Now that you've gone through two major events here, emergency type events in the last 6 months, what's your primary concern about going forward about our capabilities?
Well, as I said, I want to make sure that John has the most effective tools possible to do a good job. So in some ways you go in there and you think you're in a bunker somewhere from the 50s or 60s or whatever, and we need to recognize that investments need to be made, that at the very time when we need assistance the most, sometimes it's based on old equipment and outdated equipment or whatever, so we need to have a plan so that we, over a period of time, update the center so that John can do his job more effectively. And as I said, I am really interested in the social media aspect of here. We know from our use this past storm of Code Red that we got to a little over half the homes. You know, some homes don't have phones, some homes have a Cox phone that is out during the storm, and so we know we're not going to hit every single household. So the question is, how can we use a multitude of tools, as John stated, whether it be the radio, social media, or whatever. But I think that social media holds the most promise in terms of up-to-date, immediate information, both being transmitted and also received. And so I hope that over the next year we can see a lot of progress in that regard.
And I
too.
think Cox, I think the town hall is also on Cox for
Yes.
telephone.
Yes, it
right?
is.
So
Yeah.
when it's out, it's out.
Yeah.
You did put out a code red on the opening of the shelter, and I got it on my my regular phones are out, but I got it on my cell phone, and it was good. It was pertinent, I think, at that time. You say it reached about half of the residents, you
Right.
think? What would you recommend for people to do?
Well, I'm very aware that people are reluctant to give out their cell phone numbers for privacy issues for a lot of reasons. But I would strongly suggest that if residents haven't signed up and put additional avenues so that we can contact them, that they contemplate doing that. We don't hand these numbers out. We don't use them for other purposes. And as you know, we've made a firm commitment that we're only going to use Code Red for emergency type purposes. We're not using it to tell people we're going to have a chicken barbecue on Saturday night. This is only for emergency purposes. And the truth is that if they're counting on their Cox phone, and some people don't have a regular phone, and if they only have a cell phone and we don't have those numbers. We have all of the numbers of the home phones, but we don't have cell phones, and the only way that we can get those if people go onto our website and actually put the information in. And I hope many more will do that, because that is how we were able to contact so many people.
Now, that link to that, is that also on the Portsmouth Emergency website?
Yes,
The link to the
Code Red.
Code Red.
Code Red you can reach from the town website, right on the home page. You
Okay,
can reach
great.
it from the EMA website.
You know, I'd like to get Dave Keogh in here at some point to talk about the DPW
Yes.
operations, because, as I say, I was sitting in the EOC for just a period, and I was constantly hearing these guys out there with the plows going through their thing.
If I can just
yes.
briefly touch on what the DPW
Please do.
schedule
I need
was
some-
like during the storm. They
Yeah.
started at 7 o'clock on Friday morning, and they took their first break Saturday at 8 p.m. They went 37 hours straight in this storm. Dave sent the men home, and they came back to hit it again Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, and they worked 12 hours on Sunday.
Yeah. Great job, guys.
They did
is
a
all
great
I can
job.
say.
Yeah.
We're just about out of time. I'd like to also put a pitch in for the police and fire department. Those guys were busy. They did sterling work as usual. They're constantly out there looking out for the citizens. If people have any comments concerning emergency procedures, who should they contact? And I guess the answer is the email address should be coming up on the screen shortly, but I guess that would be you, John.
Yes.
John Klimm. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And do you have any final comments? Very brief. We're going to have to get out of here, but
See our website, please volunteer.
okay, thank you. Before I leave, I'd like to put one plug in for a 375th event. The next one that you will see if this airs next Wednesday, which it usually does, is the Melville Park Walk. It's on the 23rd of February. It's a Saturday from 1 to 3. Now come on down and join us. That's all from me, Doug Smith. Thank you very much.
Portsmouth's 375th birthday celebration started out with a splash on New Year's Day as several hundred people, cheered on by hundreds of supporters, braved the cold waters of the Sakonnet River at the 375 Polar Plunge. The next event will be the 375th Soup Sunday on February 17th, when you can be part of the heart. Then on February 23rd, take a guided winter walk at Melville Park. For more information on these events and more, and how you can join your friends and neighbors in the celebration, visit www.portsmouthri375.com.